Chapter 13. Benedict felt a warmth on his face that wasn't there before. Shading his eyes, he opened them and saw that the sun had moved beyond the pale of the tree looming over him. I must have fallen asleep, he told himself. Little by little, it came back to him. The staghorn inventory, and of course, the Sinjubba. Benedict wondered how long he had been out of it. An hour? At least that, judging by the pit in his stomach. I hope I haven't missed dinner, he thought. Rolling onto his belly, he pushed himself up on all fours. Then, laboriously, he got to his feet. That was when he stopped, and turned to his left, and peered into the stand of mahogany trees. For just a moment, he thought he had glimpsed something among the trees, sliding through the shadows. But now that he looked that way, he was less certain of it. Finally, he chalked it up to his hallucinogen-addled imagination and moved on. Or at least, he was about to. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it again. Chuckling to himself, Benedict affixed his flattened hand against his forehead for shade and tried to get a better look at the thing. It was definitely moving, slowly and languidly, like a well-fed praying mantis, but moving nonetheless. He smiled. There weren't any oversized insects in the domes, just the few tiny ones they needed to make the ecosystems work. So it can't be an insect, he told himself. No way. It had to be a branch moving in the breeze. Branches were all they had there in the domes. Branches full of leaves, branches full of needles, long branches and short ones. Branches in every goddamn place you look. And the occasional human being. But Benedict was getting better and better at avoiding those. Turning off his comm unit had helped. That way, he was never in contact when he didn't want to be in contact. Like now, for instance. As he watched, amused, the thing in the shadows moved again. Or maybe it was a different thing this time. With the leaf stuff clouding his mind, it was difficult for Benedict to be sure. Oh, get closer, you idiot, he thought good-naturedly. Following his own advice, he found he could make it out, despite the shadows. It was dark, almost skeletal-looking, and it stood on 2 stalks instead of 1. Like a man, he mused. More likely, it was an intersection of 2 narrow tree trunks, joined by his mind into what seemed like a single structure. But it pleased Benedict to think of it as bipedal. His smile broadened like a child's. What can it be? Animal, vegetable, mineral. A pure product of his hallucinogen-soaked imagination, constructed out of thin air. Delighted with the idea of a mystery, he moved closer to it. He just hoped he wasn't disappointed when the mystery was solved. Ripley and her companions had traversed 2 domes worth of terrain by the time they reached the dark octagonal entrance to the colony's control center, so they were glad to see how easily the door slid open for them. Moving inside, they found themselves in another dimly lit passage, just like the ones that mediated between one domed environment and the next. Then the door opened at the far end, and they saw an older man with a mane of grey hair. It was the administrator with whom Ripley had spoken earlier. What was his name? Philippakos. Welcome, he said, his voice more fluid than it had seemed over the comlink. Where are the others? Ripley asked. Without hesitation, Philippakos jerked a thumb over his shoulder. Back there. Let's see them, she said. After all, it might have been a trap. Hadn't Philippakos refused to grant Ripley and her people access to the domes until she said she would find a way in on her own? Even botanists could be dangerous creatures if they felt threatened. This way, said Philippakos. He led them up a short ramp into the center of a round, well-lit facility. Its observation ports afforded Ripley a 360-degree view of the immediately surrounding domes. Beneath nearly every port was a computer workstation. One of them was manned at the moment. The other colonists, 3 women and 2 men, were standing in a group at the side of the center opposite the ramp. All 5 of them regarded Ripley with the same awkward mixture of relief and wariness. Obviously, they still didn't trust her, even after she had shown them that she knew what she was talking about. I hope you've got safeties on those burners, said the man at the workstation, a brawny specimen whose brown safety officer's jacket had his name embroidered on its breast. Shepherd. It was a fitting name for someone in charge of security, especially when he was dealing with so helpless a flock. They have no safeties, said Ripley, which was the truth. Crack had made them that way. Shepherd looked skeptical. However, he wasn't the important one in the group. Neither was Philippakos. The colonist Ripley needed to find was the one with the embryo growing in his chest, the one who would soon give birth to a monster. Sniffing the air, she tried to figure out which of them it was, but she couldn't discern the scent. That meant the afflicted one was somewhere else. The one who had the spidery thing on his face. Where is he? She demanded. He's dead, said Philippakos. It was the truth. Ripley could tell. How long ago? She asked. About the time you contacted us, he said. One of the other men stepped forward. He was thin, balding, with sharp features and a voice to match. You're going to hunt it down, he said. Right? Ripley shook her head. Not a chance. The sharp-featured man turned to Philippakos. I thought they were going to get rid of this thing. You don't understand, said Ripley. The alien is the hunter here. The best thing we can do is try to escape it in one piece. Right now, it's still in its early maturation process. If we move quickly, we'll get out of here alive. You mean leave? Said one of the women, a hard-looking individual with close-cropped hair the color of sand. Just like that? You know how long we've lived here? Ripley eyed her. I know how long you will live if the alien gets hold of you. This isn't a termite infestation. We're talking about something more deadly than any predator you've ever imagined. She could recite Ash's assessment of the species word for word. It was imprinted on her brain like all of her predecessors' memories. The alien is a perfect organism, superbly structured, cunning, quintessentially violent. With your limited capabilities, you have no chance against it. And, Ripley added, they've wiped out colonies a damned sight bigger than this one. Why haven't I heard of any of those colonies? Asked the woman with the sand-colored hair. Why weren't we warned? Because, Ripley said as reasonably as she ever said anything. There are people who don't want you to know. But that discussion will have to wait. First, we need to get you out of here. Oh, this is our home, Philippakos explained. We can't abandon it without exploring every option open to us. Man, you already have, said Jonah, who had managed to stay quiet to that point. You just don't know it. Wait a minute, said Shepard, undeterred by Jonah's brawn. Dr. Philippakos is raising a legitimate question. Huh. Well, Dr. Philippakos can kiss my hairy ass, said Jonah. We didn't come here to hold your whittle hands. We came here to evacuate the place, and that's what we're... Ripley cut him short with a gesture. What Jonah is saying, she translated, is that you're not in a position to consider alternatives. You have to leave now. The safety officer started to protest, but Philippakos held a hand up. It's all right, Shep. These people know what we're dealing with better than we do. What if we want to stay? Said the fourth man, a fellow with dark skin and darker hair. Philippakos turned to him. I've already decided that we'll all go, Cody. You have, said the dark-skinned man. But what about the rest of us? He looked around the room. This is our home. Maybe it's worth a little risk. Just what I was thinking, said the sandy-haired woman. Ripley felt like telling them to suit themselves, but she couldn't let them stay here. Not when the aliens needed hosts, and humans had proven themselves so capable in that regard. Listen, she said. What happened to your colleague wasn't an accident. It was meant to happen, and it's going to happen again one way or another if you try to stay. She looked from one of them to another. Some of you must have seen what happened to him. The agony he was in. The way the creature exploded from his chest. One of the women flinched. She had dark hair pulled up into a ponytail and light-colored eyes. We're getting you out of here, Ripley said, brooking no arguments. It's the only option that makes sense. My thoughts exactly, said Philippakos. Then he seemed to remember something and said, Son of a bitch. Ripley had a feeling she knew why, but then she had been down this road before. Who's missing? Benedict, said Philippakos. He looked concerned and exasperated at the same time. He didn't respond to my summons, probably because he's fallen asleep. Asleep? Jonah echoed, a note of derision in his voice. He does that, said the administrator, looking not the least bit happy about it. I'll find him, said Shepard, getting up from his chair and starting for the ramp. As he walked by Ripley, she grabbed his forearm. Don't bother. You won't find him. The safety officer pulled his arm back, an expression of resentment on his face. I hate to tell you, he said evenly, but you don't give the orders around here. I'm just letting you know, she said. Your friend is meat. You'd do better to forget about him. Shepard's jaw muscles rippled. Benedict is my responsibility, and I don't abandon people. Ripley felt something stiffen inside her. I don't either. But they always seem to find a way to die anyway. Like Newt and Hicks. She thought she had saved them from the aliens, those two, if no one else. But they had perished when their evac vehicle crash-landed on Fiorina. Call came forward. "If you go after Benedict," she explained to Shepard, "the alien will get you too." "How can you be so certain the creature has gotten hold of him?" Philippakos asked. "We're not new to this," said the android. "If you want to survive, you'll follow our lead." Philippakos turned to Ripley again and studied her face. Then he said in a soft voice, "Get Benedict and bring him back here, Shep, as quickly as possible." "Done," said Shepard, and made for the exit again. "You don't get it," Call snapped at Philippakos. "You send him out there, you'll lose him too." The administrator looked torn, but he said, "We'll have to take that risk." Ripley sighed. Why do people always have to learn the hard way? "Go with him," she told Call. Call shot a glance at her as if to say, "Why me?" "Because you're more durable than the others, and because you faced the aliens before." Besides, Ripley had something else in mind for herself and Jonah. "Go," she told Call. "I'm going," her comrade said reluctantly. Then she followed Shepard out of the control center. "I don't understand," said the smallest of the botanists, a woman who looked more like a little girl than an adult. "If this life form is too dangerous for Shepard to confront, why isn't it too dangerous for your friend?" Jonah laughed. It was an ugly sound, even when one had gotten used to it. "Call is a lot tougher than she looks." "In the meantime," said Ripley, "we've got to evacuate the rest of you, and some of you won't make it up the chains we've dropped. Is there another way out besides your supply bay?" Philippakos nodded. "There's a backup. As far as we know, it's still working. But it's way on the other side of the colony, at the far end of Dome 16. Ripley considered the information. "What kind of ground vehicles do you have here?" "We call them flivvers," said Philippakos. "They're actually solar-powered Walmart runabouts. Not much in the speed department, but they get us around." "Where are they?" she asked. "Parked outside," said Cody. "One of them still got Pandor's bloody body in it." Philippakos heaved a sigh. "Poor Elijah." "All right," said Ripley. "Crack is going to stay here, in case the alien gets in somehow." "What?" said the man with the sharp features. "How can it do that? Everything is locked." Ripley ignored him. "Call and Shepard will be taking a flivver?" she asked Philippakos. The botanist nodded. "Then Jonah and I will take the other one and check the backup supply bay." "What about Pandor?" asked Cody. "He won't be coming with us," said Ripley. Simone waited until he was sure the others were in the Betty's cockpit, occupied with one thing or another. Then he made his way to the cargo hold and approached the docking port. It made him sick to his stomach to see the way Ripley's extended chain made an unnatural turn and projected forward into the depths of the dome. as if it was held there by magic, he thought, and that made him even queasier. To that point, he had always been certain of up and down, if nothing else. Now he didn't know what was going on. But that isn't going to stop me, he thought. Down in the dome, the tops of the trees looked restless in what must have been an artificial breeze, as if they knew their sanctum had been invaded and were uncomfortable with the idea. Even if that were so, one more invader wouldn't hurt. Especially if he's just there to observe the others. Simone wrapped his fingers around the chain at the point just before it entered the dome's grav field and made its turn. If it held the likes of Jonah, it would certainly hold him. He could take it all the way down to the ground. Then he could go wherever Ripley and her companions had gone, and there wasn't a single person there to stand in his way. It was a heady thought, a thought that invited possibilities. Simone hadn't subjected himself to any serious physical exertion in a long time. Certainly, he hadn't done any climbing, and returning up the chain might present a problem. On the other hand, there was a chance they could fix the colony's supply hatch, and then he wouldn't have to climb back. He could leave the place like a civilized being, on his own 2 feet. But he couldn't count on that. So, if you go down, he admonished himself, you have to be prepared to go up again. He pictured Ripley down among the trees, a shock rifle in her arms, hunting as she had hunted in centuries past. It would make his piece that much more compelling if he could see her in that mode and bring it to life. Then he again considered the climb back, and his stomach clenched. Nor would it stop clenching. In the end, Simone's curiosity was more powerful than his sense of self-preservation. But then, that was why he had become a reporter to begin with, wasn't it? Because he was too curious for his own good, and often other people's as well. Taking hold of the chain in both hands, he hooked one leg around it, and then the other. Then he closed his eyes and, quickly as possible, slid forward. He was prepared for the shift in gravity at the bend in the chain, but not the wave of vertigo that accompanied it. After all, he hadn't seen Ripley or the others experience any discomfort. Then the dizziness passed, and Simone allowed himself to slide down the chain hand over hand. It wasn't easy on either his shoulders or his legs, but it wasn't that difficult either. Sooner than he would have thought possible, he had descended to the level of the tallest treetops. Moments later, he began to penetrate the canopy, following the chain down through a sea of dark, leafy branches. Simone smiled to himself, never having been so high up in a tree before. It was unexpectedly peaceful. He made a mental note of the fact, knowing how much his readers loved colorful details. It smelled really nice too. All in all, it was a remarkably pleasant experience, the kind people might pay for if it were packaged as an exotic vacation. He made a note of that as well. Finally, he reached the ground and tried to get his bearings, but he had turned around several times in the course of his descent, so he wasn't sure which way was which. There's one sure way to find out, he mused, and searched for a slice of sunlit ground. Placing himself on it, he looked up and caught sight of the Betty. She was squatting precisely on the highest point of the dome, which rendered her the equivalent of a huge sundial. Fortunately, Simone remembered the direction in which her shadow had fallen, which was coincidentally in the same quarter as the exit for which Ripley had headed. Looking at the ship now, with the sun beating on her near flank, the reporter determined that his path lay almost straight ahead. That way it is, he thought cheerfully. And for a half-dozen strides, he continued to feel that way. Then the canopy above him seemed to grow thicker, and the slivers of sunlight disappeared. And the nature of his journey changed. It wasn't a careless jaunt anymore. It was a passage from one well of shadow into another, and what little he could see didn't look promising. "Come on," he told himself. "Do you want this story or not?" There was only one answer to such a question. Simone had followed Ripley's trail across the vastness of space, never knowing if his diligence would pay off. But he had hung on to his dream. Now that he was on the verge of realizing it, he wasn't going to let a few shadows throw him off. It was slow going for a while, slow and uncertain, but after a while he saw slivers of light again, and knew by them that he was well on his way to the exit. Well, he thought, that wasn't so bad. As he went on, the canopy thinned some more. Sunlight became more plentiful. He breathed more easily. He wasn't sure what made him look back over his shoulder. Something glimpsed at the edge of his vision, a sound too soft to register at the conscious level. Whatever it was, he turned and saw someone coming down the chain from the Betty. Simone shaded his eyes against the unfiltered sunlight to get a better view, came to the conclusion that the figure was a man. Well, he thought, that narrows it down. It couldn't be Bolero, and Vriess wasn't in any shape to be lowering himself down. That left Rama. He's coming after me. Like Simone needed a frickin' nursemaid. He had gotten down the chain just fine, hadn't he? And he had overheard enough of Ripley's conversations to know exactly how to make his way to the control center. But Ripley didn't like surprises. He had learned that right off the bat. When he showed up all of a sudden, her eyes would pop out of her head, and she wouldn't look kindly on whomever she had left in charge of the Betty. On the other hand, Simone was a big boy. He knew the risk he was taking. Had they been talking about a fully grown alien, he might have thought twice about entering the dome. But this one was still a baby, and he knew from the band histories that babies didn't hunt. They stayed out of the way for the most part, turning nutrients borrowed from their hosts into flesh and bone. So there was no reason for Ripley or anybody else to worry about him. If Rama caught up with him, Simone would just tell him to screw himself. He wasn't going back until he got his story. Still, he found himself watching Rama descend. Was I that slow? He asked himself. And that awkward. Simone was about to start walking again when he saw something so bizarre, so unexpected, that for a moment he didn't believe it was really happening. Something shot out of one of the treetops, as if launched by a catapult, and attached itself to Rama's leg. And as the reporter looked on, unable to tear his eyes away, the thing climbed higher. Simone heard a scream, long and loud and full of terror. And pain. He told himself numbly. Definitely pain. Then Rama seemed to lose his grip on the chain, and both he and the thing went plummeting through the canopy. The reporter stood there for a moment, too shocked to move. Then he turned and got his legs going, and accelerated until he was running as fast as he could. The damned thing's not supposed to hunt yet, he insisted, as if that would change anything. And as if that would put Rama back on the length of chain, safe and sound. As if it would erase his scream from the slate of Simone's memory. It's not supposed to hunt, Simone told himself through tears of fear. But damn it to hell, It's hunting! That meant Ripley had miscalculated. And if they couldn't depend on her knowledge of the aliens, what in the name of hell could they depend on? Another scream echoed through the dome, but this one was faint and full of resignation, as if screaming were the only way for Rama to endure what was happening to him. "Oh, come on!" Simone thought, urging himself on. "Move, goddammit!" He hoped the alien took its time with Rama, picking his bones clean, because as soon as it finished, it was coming after Simone next.